So here we are, there we go. Welcome to SUSE Tools Roadmap discussion. It's the November 2023 11, that's November. As usual, let me share my screen and I can tell you what we had last month next. So first close within last 6 days. Actually, let me check first. The last roadmap discussion, I think, was at the beginning of October. Yep, we had that, so we can actually limit that to just 31 days. And what we can see here is that's better. Can clearly see and read it. All right, we have 87 tickets, so that's just let's say back to our velocity in tickets per time, actually above our mean expectation there with, well, nearly 3 tickets per calendar day. What you can see is the category in the projects where we have a category. The biggest category is actually blank because we are using trackers which are pretty specific enough. So we category there. So for example here, OpenQA infrastructure is one of the main one, but there's also feature requests. So let's start that. So what we had done is we had applied measures to mitigate a WebSocket overload by workers. That was an issue that we had encountered in before already by now a month ago, where when we have too many OpenQA workers connecting to one instance, it's overwhelming the central instance to the point where there are no more jobs picked up at all anymore. And this ticket here was about to revert the temporary measures that we have applied in the meantime. So we are back to the usual number of connected instances for both OpenQA OpenSUSE.org as well as OpenQA SUSE. We looked into reducing a duplication of the OpenQA and OpenQA tests as well as OpenSUSE history OpenSUSE and the specific tests that we have for that. That's linked to the saga to what the saga about full version control awareness, and one part of that saga is to bring further that plugin infrastructure of auth audience, where it's possible to have distinct specific Git repositories which include a plugin, and they could be reused in multiple distributions. So we provided prototypes. This is a spike solution, a time box solution, bring people off the team back to the topic because we didn't have the time to look into that for a longer time, but basically confirmed that the initial design and the approach that still valid and should be followed on. And I will mention that again later when we talk about the plan. We learned that the OpenQA investigate feature needs more documentation. So I should be able to find a reference to that, because one topic that was done is to identify reproducible test issues from OpenQA investigate jobs. And I can show you one example here, where you see an OpenQA test, and that OpenQA test, by now it has lost the colorful blobs about the status of the results because those jobs don't exist anymore. But the idea still applies. Read-write job is conducted, the last good test is conducted, last good build is conducted, and last good test and build is conducted for a failed job as investigation. And as a consequence, then afterwards, our friendly bot GeekoTest can then, when all the jobs are finished, can make a conclusion. Already could look at the read-write job and say simply, well, if the read-write job passed, then it must have been a sporadic issue because it's not easily reproducible by just retrying. If the it could already look into finding likely candidates for product issues. And now what it also does, it can take a look into the other results and combine that and come to the conclusion something is a test issue. So in that case, the retry job failed. Jobs including the last good tests are okay. So it is possible to come back to a state which worked by reverting the test change. So that is why GeekoTest arrives to the conclusion that this is likely a test issue, right? So that should be a really helpful issue for any reviewers, obviously, in particular the not expert reviewers, because I know that we have multiple expert reviewers that just they know what's going on, they have a lot of experience, so they can come to that conclusion by themselves, or maybe even quicker sometimes before needing to wait for investigation jobs. But for all the other cases, when an issue is new and really unclear, or if not so well-versed reviewers are involved for new products, tests and such, then we're convinced that this can help. And for that, we have not only added this feature, but also the feature of better documentation, and you can find a link from the code. Click that link, then you will actually pointed directly to the explanation with more details and examples about the investigate comment explaining that in more. So the next one, we have multi-machine test instruction, our documentation of OpenQA, but the problem is always with detailed instructions is that if they are not automatically checked, then they can eventually need adjustments, and this is what happened with the newer version of Firewall D. So we chanced to use a different approach, and now if you actually take a look into the documentation of OpenQA and we look for something like multi-machine and the multi-machine test setup, then now you can see that we provide a script which does all of what was a lengthy section of setup in before, and the script should be more or less readable in what it does. You can hear from the names, it's a IP forwarding, install packages, firewall setup, multi-machine. And we mention and explain that script in the documentation. So you can just call the script if it's good, or if you want to understand in more detail what this force audience setup multi-machine does, and that one explains what it's set up, which configuration basis, and what's left to do to configure after running that script to configure reconnaissance. So thanks a lot to people involved, in particular Dominic Heidler, who helped to bring the documentation up to. And then regular cleanup of OBS project develop in QA. So we have a project in OBS where we build OS audience, OpenQA, and some additional needed dependencies. And in particular for Leap, we provide that additional overlay project where if dependency is missing from Leap, we provide it, or if it's outdated, then provide them. The caveat for that is that, well, eventually things pile up there, even if newer versions of Leap maybe have a package or they have a more recent update, then we think that was just completed yesterday. Yes, it is. So Jan Bayer actually came up with an excellent solution of having an automated script. So we are using again in our internal GitLab CI pipeline as a fancy cron GUI, you can say, or as a way to easily monitor scheduled execution of scripts. And this is what we do. So it's like a very simple repo. You can see it has a README and a GitLab CI YAML file. So very easy to understand so far. Of course, over time things can always become a bit more elaborate. But what this does, it adds one run and is actually using the auth scripts repo, so the very same where we also have that OpenK investigate script included. And then if follow, where is it here? Our latest job that's conducted on a schedule. Then we see that basically there's nothing because there's nothing to report about. What it would do is it checks all the dependencies that we have in that extra overlay project and would explain us if we are missing special description string to tell us if we wouldn't need that dependency. And also what we did is actually deleted the things which we should not need in that overlay anymore because a more recent version is in the base product. So after features, there come regressions. And so let's see, we had problem with CodeCuff, which is checking our projects that there is always sufficient coverage for changes coming in, and in particular there are also sections where we want to ensure that at least we have complete statement coverage. Doesn't mean that the code tested there is like, you know, free of bugs or good to never come up with regressions, but at the very least we are sure that there are always some local tests that can be executed for that test, which should give all of you a safety net when you want to implement changes, like changes in the auth or the inst backends. Okay, so this also means that whenever there is a problem related to that, we take it very seriously, why we had that urgent ticket to make sure that every other unrelated pull request is. I mentioned at the beginning this revert of mitigation that's related to an alert. Sorry, not the incomplete alerts, but this one here, where we had a really long job schedule, but no jobs had been picked up. That was due to mentioned WebSocket related overload. Let's see organizational changes. Yeah, actually, as a consequence of that, of some of the problems which were encountered in the past months, we were looking into improving our internal processes. So, for example, just yesterday we talked about we should really make it clear in tickets who is working on something, what's the next expected step, as well as what not when nothing is going on or nothing is planned to. So that's also a suggestion to everybody of you. Please help us to make it very explicit in tickets what the expectations are, because you know sometimes there are some weird problems and nobody really has a handle on that to fix it, right? So that's why it's really important to make sure to understand like who's waiting for what, who plans to do what, or maybe nobody plans to do anything, and this is just a ticket for a valid issue, but nobody has any specific steps that we also have changes in the wiki with suggestions how to. We also have this nice backlog status page. Show you that. Looks like this. You might have seen it in the past, and what we see here is that we added more entries. For example, no immediate or urgent ticket must be blocked at all. So we will not allow any of that tickets to stay in the blocked state, because as long as it is urgent, it cannot be blocked, and please apply some mitigation. But you also see that we have service level objectives, which are like team internal facing, and for those we have red alerts, which is a reminder for ourselves in the tools team that there's something that we need to act upon and make sure that those tickets do not show up here anymore. We also now upgraded or finished upgrade, so that's this epic and all the ticket you can see mentioned 5 here, so that our lead production infrastructure, which is for OpenK open source org, SUSE API container images, QAM host, everything that we maintain and control within this tools team is ensured to be current operating system, run OpenSUSE Tumbleweed in some cases, but most of the production current deep, which again it is the last week stable version. After that, we have a lot of infrastructure related. So let's take a look. We have new ARM servers. We have added more. Since, for example, some of you are using the machine ADA, which is a hypervisor host for manual testing. Yeah, Phoenix?
We have new ARM servers?
Say again?
We have new ARM servers?
Yes, there is. Well, it's a singular, so there is a new ARM server. That new ARM server is configured as a bare metal test machine with the infrastructure. The machine is called Monkey 3. So if you want details, please take a look.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we added more systems to our Salt so that we can properly maintain and monitor them, keep them up to date, and upgrade them, which by now also ADA as a manual hypervisor host, but also more. We are using 2 systems with multiple blaze included, which are now in the Nuremberg 2 location, FC basement, which are acting as a replacement for machines which were formerly in Nuremberg 1, the old Max 2 data center. And those are used for various purposes, for example, for bare metal test machines. So this is why it's meant. Yeah. Problem about this. A lot of failures due to the migration, which is not caused by us, but a consequence. And then in blend. Let's see. So we had, well, okay, let's not go into detail, but let's just say that there are a lot of problems happening somewhere in the SUSE infrastructure, and as much as possible, we want to shield users from that. In some cases, we can, in some cases, could not accomplish that. So actually feel the impact as well. Like, there's a DNS outage, and that actually affects all tests. And then we have testing completes or hosts not up to date. Yeah, I just want to mention that there was also bigger multi-machine test issue. So some of you might know this story. And we did conduct lessons learned meeting, and out of that, some consequences. For example, what I mentioned about improving our communication in ticket is a consequence of that lesson learned ticket. In case you want to know how we do that, or how do we conduct such a lessons learned meeting. So what I'm suggesting here is a 5 why analysis. Simple link to Wikipedia should explain that sufficiently enough. And then you can see the details. For example, here in this comment, so that case was taking the minutes. Mostly we have an Etherpad document and work on that together. So while we talk in a meeting, we are also recording the results in Etherpad and then copy it over to the ticket. And as a follow-up, then we make sure to also record all the individual actions one by one in a ticket that we can then later work on. As you can see, multiple of those have already been solved. Some of them are still open because you cannot do anything at once, but one by one. And I'm taking those steps very seriously. So if we come to a problem and we see the need to conduct some analysis, the 5 why, and come up with improvements, then I'm also making sure that we have according priority applied to those tasks so that implement those tasks, because they should be easy enough to actually implement, but they should also help us in the future to prevent some. Let's see, there might also be another 5 why analysis did execute here. You see that we had a task to bring multiple spring machines up to date, which means like the operating system, no failed services, reacting to alerts, making sure that our inventory management system is up to date, especially when it involved moving, and also us him taking over responsibility for. And that's it. So, any questions about the resolved task or what we had completed in the past month? All right, so let's take a look at the high level, the top level overview. So we have the multiple sagas in the pipeline. We have the, actually I included here in the query now the both target versions, ready and next. So ready is current and next, next. And the most prominent one is still the queue setup in Prague 2 in Nuremberg. Actually, right now, there had been multiple delays over the past months where which didn't directly involve us, which means that we didn't need to invest that much time area over the past months. However, some of the tasks are still pending and we couldn't finish all of the tasks that we needed to, to finally ready from new data center and not rely on old data centers and or this is factors external to our team. But this is why it's actually still needs to be prominently featured here. And I think the engineers among you can confirm that we are still impacted by that move. Or then the next is rather old saga about the full version control awareness. I mentioned, for example, the was order in fields which related to that, other stories which are related to that. These ideas about storing the complete job templates in Git. And let's see if we can push this a bit further after the queue setup is finished. The third one, the saga about OpenGate for SUSE customers. I mentioned the OBS project cleanup. That's related to this story. Why is that? Well, we want to make sure that we have all the packages that we need to run a OpenGate infrastructure, including the test distribution of also this distribution from, let's say, properly SLE supported enterprise package base. So this is why we need to go the, let's say, the extra mile to make sure that all the necessary dependencies are in not only open source products, but also products. Means find out all the missing or outdated dependencies, make sure that for each of those we prepare an according update request, that those update requests actually each release products like 15 SP5 or will be present in 6, so that we can build an appliance like SUSE BCI container based on that. Now, if we want to take a look into more detail, the current backlog, actually, let me shortly show you again this overview here. So current backlog, that's with the 45 tickets included, means that is what the team should focus on right now and in the upcoming days and weeks. And after that, staging ground for next things to pick up is next. So let's take a look at this backlog now. We've just seen 45 tickets. So what's currently being worked on? Well, problems, obviously. Like, I think this was still related to the DNS failure, and then sometimes there are problems with either the internal or external the container registry. So this is about that. Then we had handled Perl deprecation warning message faithfully. I think this was waiting for the acceptance of some submit request. Then by now we have with more and more machines that we are including in our solid structure, and we monitor them. And some graphs include like all of those hosts, and then the graphs can, become a bit too big and too slow. So this is why we are implying some there. And one thing which was impacting some of you lately, like the SUSE BCI test as well as the kernel test in particular, is a longer job queue on OSD for PowerPC 64 So why I'm trying to consolidate all the observations in this topic, and I was coming up with multiple improvement ideas. Actually, none of those are actually currently planned to do, except for one, which is to really communicate what we have and what would be expected, and that in reality, realistically speaking, cannot expect much more than that. Currently in progress is that, again, we have multi-test failures, and that's what we had in August, and now we are kind of a similar situation. Of course, we already ruled out some factors, and we have improved something about the setup. So it's a tiny bit easier for us to say, well, it cannot be this and this point, but there's still a lot of gray or black areas left where we are not so sure. And one of the big problem is that there are weird problems in tests which take about 1 hour to run or longer. And then it's really hard, costly, and time consuming to reproduce such issues, why it's taking long. Similar here, about test fails in iSCSI client, which was specific to the PowerPC there was a plan to migrate QM SUSE, also known as QM to SUSE Prague 2, some already weeks ago. That didn't happen. Then again, it was planned to happen yesterday, and then there were a lot of problems structure unrelated to that yesterday. So this is why the migration wasn't planned yet. And I have no further information yet when this will happen. The IBS switching to not anymore allow unauthenticated only access. We already know that most, if not all, of our tooling is using a properly authenticated access, but maybe there's some roots left where we're still relying on that unauthenticated access. So this is why we'll make sure that our tooling actually works with that before IBS enforces it. And ensure arbitrary comments can be taken over. This is merely to clarify what works and what doesn't work regarding OpenK comments, tags, and bug references, how they are taking over into new jobs or how they are not. Next after that, in workable new builds of Equidate tests should not be new ones. Well, there was a change which I applied already, and then this was causing some discontent in some areas. So I will look into that, how we can, make sure that all boarding products have their each individual specific demand for, because there might be wishes that differ by team or by product, and maybe we need some attention in the MBOT for that. Jose?
Yeah, about this topic of obsolete and deprecate. Sorry, can you hear me better?
Yep, good.
Okay, so about this topic of obsolete and deprecate, what is the best, or let's say, best practices for having these variables? Can they live together in the same ISOs post? Should we have one, either one or the other? Because yeah, I know in some cases like aggregates, maybe we want to keep the old runs in the same build. But maybe for other cases, we probably don't want to have this deprecate variable and instead obsolete, because we don't care about the previous result, and also to save resources and
right,
release the queue a bit. So what do you think about having one or the other?
So in a single ISOs post call, there can only be one selection there. However, we have one ISOs post for aggregate tests, and then we have others for incident tests. So we can distinguish there, make sure that for aggregate tests, maybe we have the station. And also there are 3 different alternatives that we can. There's obsolete, which means like all existing jobs of aggregate tests would be cancelled. Then there's only obsolete same build, which would apply the obsolescence, but not affect older builds, just if same build is like scheduled or something. And then however, that would be, if you need that, that's maybe an indication like, why do you schedule the same build? Would be a problem on that. And the third one, that's the option which I implemented, to keep all the other jobs, but if the most recent builds the highest priority, so that those one will be preferred. And if there's leftover capacity, then OpenGate can finish up all the other jobs. The only caveat is, let's assume there are 200 jobs currently running, so not scheduled, but already running. And then you have a new build. Those 200 jobs from the older build, well, when they're running, OpenGA gives them a chance to finish. So OpenGA will give the newer build the higher priority, but it will wait for those running to finish, which
So
normally shouldn't impact that much. But if you have jobs scenarios which take very long, like multiple hours, especially when they're failing and you're running a post-fail log and collecting all the logs, then this can have an impact. Yeah.
Okay, but it's only decreasing the priority of the old ones, right? Not increasing the priority of the new ones.
Yeah. So we have priorities set, and you have default priorities. Whenever you have a new build, those priorities will be applied. But for existing older scheduled jobs, you increase that number, so it will be higher and higher up to a limit. And let's give an this example. If by any chance you have 10 old builds and they are all scheduled and not finished, then those will eventually be cancelled. The limit is actually lower and per scenario, but picture it there is way out.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but I just wanted to add that not only that we issue separate ISOs posts for each version of each aggregate and then separate ISOs posts for incidents and the others, but also in the aggregates, every day is a separate build. The build number is actually the date of the day. So yeah, just to add this.
Yep, right. So that's why I was mentioning this only obsolete same build. You're talking about aggregate tests, then only under an error condition would we apply that. However, for incidents, there the build in the sense of OpenGA is the same for every incident. You have that incident number and the package. And if you have a new submission of the package from OpenGA point of view, it's still the same build. It's like a new incarnation of the same build. Like, repo hash changes, maybe the repo content changes significant or maybe not significant way. So this is why new tests are scheduled. That makes sense. But maybe in that case, you actually want to cancel the older running one. But that's, maybe really depending on how much capacity you have. Do we have other problems? This is only a symptom of support move of S390 mainframe. So by now, all the mainframe infrastructure from Nuremberg 1 had been disabled. And we are running from Prague 2, but not all the test infrastructure is fully set up yet. And there's also related to this ticket, there is one for the open org testing and to finish the ZVM setup. And I know that some you are still struggling with the switch to this, switching to the generic worker class S390 KVM, but now means you're running from that instances because the others do not exist anymore. And in some cases, your tests might still have the old worker class and there's just no worker resource available for that anymore. So that need to. And then migrating AH6403 to FC basement. So there was this one older machine which is capable also to run 32-bit tests, and this is why we have that ticket open, bring that machine back into SUSE. Yeah, so much about that. Then what's in new? Well, network problems. Then one thing related to the OS audience plugins, the wheels, that we would like to conduct research. How can one efficiently cache those wheel repositories? For example, GitHub, so that think of a new build of Tumbleweed 300 tests. Don't want to clone 300 times per build every time the very same Git repository, but somewhat more smarter how to use that when it's already there from in. Then ensure automated OpenK tests verified that Odin setup multi-machine sets up valid network should help us to make sure what our documentation says, the script which we already execute in automated tests, but we do not yet fully validate that what the script does in automated tests is really setting up something that works for multi-machine tests. So that's what this does. And make the final aggregation messages from OpenInvestigate more prominent. So I showed you already that example, but sometimes let's take a look for another example. Problem. So like here we have an investigate job, and from every investigate job over the settings table, you can follow back to the original job via the investigate origin link. And then if you take a look on comments, then we see this. So this is the comment when jobs are triggered, and it does show the current result. But the important consequence, which might be overlooked by some, is the second or the last commit. Because in particular, this message here. Because what this one does actually includes the aggregation. I mean, in this example, we just have one retry job, but still it's providing a conclusion. So maybe that message is not prominent enough, and you just think like, yeah, well, it's another comment. Why does it even mention the same job again? And it's not here what to look. And the last step I want to show is the state of next. So what is planned after ready? For example, yeah, here move of selected queue Nuremberg 1 to Prague 2. As I mentioned, there were some delays, so there's still some machines in Nuremberg 1, and we are basically hold there and waiting, and then we can follow up. And then I mentioned the extension of automated tests for the multi-machine test setup. And here we want to extend or add initial validation steps and best practices for a multi-machine test setup and debugging to the, so that after the setup, you would know what to do to make sure that everything is in place, or it would tell you if something. What else? First mention improving a ticket template. Right, yeah, there was one requirement stated that we should check or ensure that OpenK itself works in an SE first environment. At this point, it's Epic, and based on that, we can find specific sub tasks so that we can, from the already workable defined task, you can see that there is one seldomly appearing sporadic issue in the OpenK tests. Should look to improve some about alerting timeout in local tests. The mentioned S390 setup, something more about alerting and moving. Okay, fine. Any questions or additions to what we have in the backlog or in next? All right. Then we are done with this roadmap discussion. For the next time, so yeah, we have three for this month for all three next appointments. So if you have topics, please bring them up. Otherwise, I guess we will come up with a detailed look into the recently deployed features or changes and discuss them in more detail. If you have proposals, then please let us know, and we are happy to accommodate. Okay, guys, so thank you. That's it. And the next time.